The easterly pattern continues to dominate the conversation, and for good reason. We are looking at a potential shift in the weather regime that could bring significant changes across the United Kingdom by the end of January. I have examined the latest model runs from the Met Office, ECMWF, and the GFS. There is an interesting divergence developing. The traditional models are suggesting one scenario. The AI-driven models are pointing in a different direction. Both can be right. So let S work through what we're actually seeing. Right now, conditions across the country are rather varied. The contrast is quite stark, depending on where you are. Across southern and central England, temperatures have been running around 9 or 10 degrees Celsius. That S mild for mid-January. Rather pleasant, actually. Some areas seeing good sunny spells. Essex has been experiencing very windy conditions today. Peterborough and Cambridgeshire saw heavy rain earlier this evening. Nothing particularly wintry about any of that. The Isle of Wight region has been mostly dry. Cowes even has daffodils beginning to bloom. That tells you something about how mild it's been down there. Move north to Norfolk and the east coast, and you are dealing with persistent rain, nearly all day in some locations, coming down quite heavily this evening along the coastal areas. Further north into Scotland, it's a different story entirely. Frost has been widespread across much of Scotland and northern England overnight. The Scottish Highlands are seeing wintry conditions over higher ground. Proper cold up there. That Arctic air is already in place across the northern parts of the country. The Midlands and parts of Wales have been dealing with fog warnings. Yellow warnings issued by the Met Office for the northwest of England, portions of Wales and the West Midlands. Radiation fog forming overnight and into tomorrow morning. Visibility dropping significantly in places. So we've got mild and wet in the south, cold and frosty in the north. That temperature gradient is significant. And it's about to become even more important. Let me explain what is happening meteorologically. We have a series of Atlantic low-pressure systems moving across the country from the southwest. These are bringing the mild, moist air and the rain you are seeing across southern areas. Standard westerly pattern for January. Nothing unusual there, but look at what is sitting to our east. There is a body of cold air over Scandinavia and northern Europe. Temperatures well below freezing. And the question that S-dominated weather discussion for the past fortnight is this: will that cold air push west across the UK, or will the Atlantic systems continue to dominate? The traditional models, the UKMO and the standard ECMWF runs, have been favouring the Atlantic pattern. Mild and wet continuing through the rest of January. Occasional colder interludes, but nothing sustained. The AI models, which analyze historical patterns and events, are suggesting something different. They are showing a breakdown of the westerly flow, a shift to easterlies, cold air from the continent pushing across the UK, potentially significant cold and snow, particularly for eastern areas. Now, I need to be clear about forecast confidence here. We're relooking at timeframes beyond 72 hours. At this range, uncertainty increases considerably. The wobbles in the models are already evident. That is why you are seeing such different outcomes between model suites. What I can tell you with reasonable confidence is what is happening over the next 48 to 72 hours. Beyond that, we are into lower confidence territory. Tomorrow, expect a mostly dry night for much of the country. Clear spells developing. That S when the frost will form across Scotland and northern England. Temperatures dropping below freezing quite widely across the northern half of the UK. Could see -3 or -4 Celsius in rural Scotland. Possibly lower in sheltered glens. The fog will be an issue overnight into Thursday morning. If you are in the northwest, parts of Wales, or the West Midlands, give yourself extra time for the morning commute. Visibility could be down to 50 metres or less in the densest patches. Fog should lift by mid-morning as we get some heating from the sun. Showers will be moving in from the southwest during Thursday. These will affect southwestern England initially, then spread northeast through the day. Most of these will be rain at lower levels. But over higher ground in Wales and the Pennines, there could be some sleet mixing in. Snow confined to elevations above 300 to 400 metres. Nothing significant at this stage. Friday brings a band of rain moving across from the west. This clears eastward through the day. Behind it, we'll see showers developing. Some of these could turn heavy. There's potential for thunder and lightning, particularly across western areas. Bit of hail mixed in as well, wind speeds picking up, gusting to around 40 or 50 miles per hour along exposed coasts. Scotland will see the coldest conditions on Friday. Daytime temperatures struggling to get much above 2 or 3 degrees Celsius across the Highlands and northern areas. Further south, temperatures more typical for the time of year. Around 6 to 8 degrees for England and Wales. Friday night into Saturday, we're looking at another widespread frost across Scotland. Temperatures could drop to -5 or -6 Celsius in some locations, perhaps lower still in the glens. These will be the most severe frosts of the week. If you are in Scotland, make sure vulnerable pipes are protected. Check on elderly neighbours. This is properly cold. Saturday itself looks mostly dry for many areas. Some showers around, particularly in the west. These could turn wintry over high ground. But for most, a reasonable day. Cold in the north, milder further south. And that brings us to the key question. What happens beyond the weekend? This is where the models diverge significantly. The traditional forecast from the Met Office and standard ECMWF suggests the Atlantic pattern continues, low pressure systems tracking across or near the UK, mild air from the southwest, temperatures staying around average or slightly above, unsettled, wet at times but not particularly cold, certainly no sustained cold spell. The AI models are painting a different picture. They're re-showing high pressure building to the north or northeast of the UK around the 24th to 26th of January. This would block the Atlantic systems, force them to track further south, and crucially, it would draw in easterly winds, cold air from Scandinavia and Russia pushing across the North Sea into the UK. If this pattern develops, you'd be looking at a significant cold spell, temperatures well below average. Potential for snow, particularly across eastern areas where you do have moisture coming off the North Sea, meeting that cold air. The sort of setup that can produce heavy snow across East Anglia, Lincolnshire, Yorkshire, areas that Don T always see significant snow in a typical winter. Now, which scenario is more likely? Honestly, at this range, it's difficult to say with high confidence. The AI models work on pattern recognition. They analyze historical setups and outcomes. They've been improving, becoming more reliable in some situations, but they are not infallible. They can lock on to patterns that Don T quite materialize. The traditional models have physics-based calculations, fundamental equations of atmospheric motion. They're incredibly sophisticated. But they also have limitations, particularly at longer ranges where small differences in initial conditions can lead to very different outcomes. What I do say is this: the potential for an easterly pattern is there. The ingredients are in place. Cold air to our east. The jet stream position is conducive to blocking. The stratospheric polar vortex has been disrupted. All of these factors support the possibility of a pattern change, but it's not certain. I've seen similar setups fail to materialize. The Atlantic wins out more often than not during January. We are an island nation in the path of the Atlantic storm track. Breaking that pattern requires everything to align just right. So what should you do? I wouldn't rush out and panic buy bread and milk just yet, but I would keep a close eye on the forecasts over the next few days. If the models start to converge on the easterly scenario, if we see that high pressure really beginning to build in the model runs, then it's time to take it more seriously. For those in Eastern England, East Anglia, this is worth watching. I know many of you have been waiting for some proper winter weather. You've gone several winters without decent snow in some areas. This pattern has the potential to deliver. But I'm not promising anything, not at this stage. Too much uncertainty. Scotland, you are already dealing with cold conditions. If the easterly pattern develops, you to see sustained cold rather than this back and forth we've been experiencing. Temperatures staying below freezing day and night for an extended period. That brings its own challenges. Frozen pipes, difficult driving conditions, increased heating costs. For southern and western areas, an easterly pattern would still bring colder conditions than you've been experiencing, but you'd likely see less snow than eastern areas. The flow would be drier by the time it reaches you, unless we get secondary developments, low pressure systems forming on the boundary between the cold air and milder Atlantic air. Then all bets are off. Let me put this in some historical context. Many of you will remember the beast from the east in February and March of 2018. That was a classic easterly pattern. High pressure over Scandinavia, bitter easterly winds, Siberian air flooding across the UK. Temperatures dropped to -14 in places. Significant snow, particularly where the cold easterly flow met moisture from the south. That event was well forecast. The models picked it up about a week in advance. The pattern was very clear. What we're re-looking at now is less certain. The signal isn't as strong, but there are similarities. The stratospheric disruption, the cold air positioning, the potential for blocking high pressure. I am not saying we are definitely heading for a repeat of 2018. The setup is different in important ways, but it's worth keeping in mind that these patterns can develop. They do happen, and when they do, they can bring significant impacts. The key time frame to watch is around the 24th to the 30th of January. That S when the divergence between the model scenarios becomes most pronounced. If we're going to see this easterly pattern establish itself, it would be in that window. Between now and then, expect variability. Some cold nights, particularly in Scotland. Milder days further south, showers at times, occasional bands of rain moving through, nothing too dramatic. Standard January weather for the UK, but stay alert. Check the forecasts daily. The Met Office updates their outlook regularly. If you see yellow warnings being issued for snow or ice, take them seriously. Don T, assume it 1T happened just because we've had a mild winter so far. A few practical points, regardless of which scenario plays out. If you haven't checked your winter supplies, now is a good time. Make sure you've got torches that work. Batteries, candles, basic food supplies. Not because we're definitely heading for severe weather, but because it is sensible preparation for winter in the UK. If you rely on heating oil or have a coal supply, check your levels. If the cold spell does materialize, you will go through fuel more quickly than usual. For those with vehicles, consider keeping a winter kit in the boot, a blanket, some high-energy snacks, a shovel if you have one, a torch, a phone charger. If you do get caught out in snow, these things can make a significant difference. Garden plants that are sensitive to frost should be protected if you are in northern areas. Scotland, you are already seeing frost. England and Wales, if the easterly pattern develops, you will need to think about protection for anything that to tolerate sustained cold. Check on vulnerable neighbours, family members, friends. Elderly people are particularly susceptible to cold-related health issues. A quick check to make sure they warm enough that they've got adequate food and heating, that can be vital. If the easterly pattern does establish, expect disruption to transport. Roads can become difficult, particularly minor roads that get gritted. Rail services can be affected by points freezing, overhead line issues. Flights can be delayed or cancelled if snow is significant. Plan ahead. Allow extra time. Consider whether you really need to travel if conditions are poor. Schools in affected areas may close. That is a decision made locally based on conditions. But if you have children, have a backup plan for childcare if needed. Now, I want to address something I've been seeing in discussions. There is a tendency when models show potential for cold and snow 2 weeks out, to get very excited. I understand that, particularly if you enjoy winter weather, but excitement needs to be tempered with realism. 2 weeks is a long way out in forecasting terms. The models can and do change, sometimes dramatically. I've seen supposedly certain cold spells vanish from the forecast within 48 hours. I've seen patterns that looked impossible suddenly develop. The wobbles in the models are already evident. That's normal at this range. It doesn't mean the forecast is rubbish or that forecasters don't know what they are doing. It means we are at the edge of useful predictability with current technology. So by all means, watch with interest, follow the model runs if that's your thing. But don't invest too heavily, emotionally or practically in any one scenario until we get closer and the confidence increases. The valid forecast period, where we can give you reasonably confident predictions, is really 72 hours. Maybe up to 5 days for broader patterns. Beyond that, it's outlook territory. Possible scenarios, trends, not certainties. I'll be monitoring this closely. If the pattern does begin to crystallize toward the easterly scenario, I'll provide updates. If it looks like the Atlantic is winning out, I'll let you know that too. The goal is to give you accurate information, not to hype up every possibility that appears in a model run. February is also a month to watch. Even if late January stays mild, February can still deliver cold and snow. Historically, some of our most significant winter weather has occurred in February. The beast from the east started in late February. The severe winter of '63 extended well into February and March. So this isn't the last chance for winter weather. Far from it. We've got February and early March still to come. Plenty of opportunity for cold spells if the pattern aligns. For now, expect the next few days to be fairly typical for January. Cold nights in Scotland, milder and unsettled further south. Fog patches overnight, showers from the west. Nothing extreme, nothing particularly unusual. Keep watching the forecasts. Stay informed. But don't panic. We are not in a severe weather situation at the moment. We are in a watching and waiting situation. There is a difference. I'll continue to analyze the model output, watch for signs that the pattern is shifting one way or the other, and provide you with honest, straightforward information without sensationalism or fear-mongering. The weather does what the weather does. Our job is to understand it as best we can, forecast it as accurately as possible, and give you the information you need to plan accordingly. That is what I'll continue to do. Check back for updates over the coming days. The picture will become clearer as we move through this week and into next week. By this time next week, we should have much better clarity on whether the easterly pattern is going to establish or whether the Atlantic remains in control. Until then, stay warm if you are in the north. Enjoy the milder conditions if you are in the south. And keep an eye